Okay, in this video, let's talk a little bit about dictionaries. Dictionaries you'll find very helpful. They're easy to master, and if you want to create rock-solid JSON, I usually start with a dictionary. I recommend you do the same thing. All right, so let's go ahead and bring up the console. Oh yeah, let's go back to the book for a second. This comes from Chapter 15, Dictionaries. Obviously, we got plenty of learning objectives for Chapter 15. We're going to really just focus on a few: how to create a dictionary, how to then generate JSON from that dictionary. Okay, and anyway, let's get started. So pull up console. That should be big enough for you guys out there. Clear the screen. Make a directory. Let's see, cddev temp, and make their dictionaries. CD dictionaries, and then code. I'm going to crank up Visual Studio Code. All right, close that window, and let's create a file called main.py, and shut that down. And I'll do a dot comment like I usually do on these videos. Demonstrate dictionaries. And then I'll define a main function, and just start with pass. And then if the name equals main underscore, right? Main. Then call the main function. Again, this is I'd call this the idiomatic main module for Python. That's not official. That's just the way I call it, right? This is the way I do it. And you'll see, like, when we create more complex programs in future videos, you'll get the point. In fact, I'll probably show you. Not in this video, but obviously we're going to tackle more complex architectures, and you're going to be happy that you have a main module that you know exactly that's where you run the program from. All right, so dictionaries. Now, dictionaries are part of the standard library, right? So how do you define a dictionary? You just usually, there's a couple ways to do it, but this is the way I do it, right? So, like, let me say, what do you want to define a dictionary of? Doesn't really matter. A dictionary is a map type where you have a name or a key and a value, okay? And the key can be different types, usually strings, but not always. And then the value could be anything. It could be integer, floats, objects. Okay. The only thing that you really got to consider is when you convert things to JSON. If you keep your dictionaries limited to fundamental data types, then you're never going to have a problem with generating JSON. Now, why JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's almost the de facto standard for information interchange. It's not the only one. You've got XML. You've got lots of proprietary binary protocols out there. But JSON is very, very popular for exchanging data between systems, right? So let's say that I want to have a dictionary of students, right? I'm going to say students equals, and then there's an empty dictionary. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create I'm going to create a key, and let's say that the key will be the students well, maybe we'll do we'll just do first name, right? It's not earth-shattering. So students So you use the square brackets, and we'll say Rick. Okay. Actually, student. Yeah, students. Okay, so Rick. Okay. Now, let's say that we wanted to add. Let's do it. Let me. Okay, so you can see I'm struggling here, right? Like with how to proceed. We could do this, and then I'll do it a different way, right? So Rick equals. I'll do another dictionary, like that, right? So now we have students, and students is a dictionary. Then we have students Rick, and Rick is a dictionary, and then students. Okay, John is a dictionary. Okay. And then I'll just do this, right? Just two. So now down here, let me come up here. I'll say students Rick. Okay, so I'm accessing that key. And then I'm going to add another key in this dictionary. And I'm going to say first name. First name equals Rick. Okay, so that would be a string. And then students. So notice how I'm actually, let me get rid of John. I'll just do Rick here, right? So Rick, first name, Rick, last name equals Miller. All right, students, Rick, age equals 54. Oops, I'll make that an integer, right? So you can do some of these are integers. Like that. All right, so that's enough for now. Let's do major. So Rick, students, Rick, major. Okay. Equals computer science. Okay, now we have a dictionary called students, and so we have the students dictionary. Then the first key is Rick, and it's a dictionary. And then Rick first name is Rick. Rick first name last name is Miller. Rick age is 54, and Rick major is computer science. So now let's print this. So print students. So I'm going to go F string students dictionary equals. I'm just going to notice I'm just sending in the students, right? The whole dictionary. So we'll see what that looks like. And we'll run this program. So let's go to the console. So let's run this program. Okay, so there's the output. We've got students dictionary equals, so here's your key, Rick, and then you've got your dictionary. Okay, so the whole thing is a dictionary, but you've got a key that then is a dictionary in and of itself, and it has subkeys, right? So first name, Rick, last name, Miller, age 54, major, computer science, right? So this is the representation of a Python dictionary. Now let's convert the Python dictionary to JSON. Okay, so let's go back to Visual Studio Code. All right, so the very first thing you want to do is you want to import JSON. Okay. Now, why would you want to convert this thing to JSON or anything to JSON, right? It's like if you wanted to preserve it and save it to a file, then that's an easy way to. That's a portable way of preserving information to share between different computer systems, right? Any computer, any application can read a JSON file. Okay, so students, then I'm going to do print, so we have a comparison. F students JSON, right? Equals. And I'm going to say JSON dot dump-s. So dump-s, you really got two methods. There's more, but the two are the most important. Dump-s and load-s, right? So we're going to convert this dictionary to a JSON string. So students, like that. So JSON dump-s students. And you'll see that the JSON representation of the dictionary is very close with one important difference between the two, right? So let's go ahead and run this. Clear the screen. Python 3. All right, now notice that the dictionary, when it prints, it has a single quote around each of the keys. And the values, like the 54 is an integer value, so it doesn't have it's not a string, right? But for the JSON, the keys have double quotes. So first name, semicolon, value, last name, semicolon, value, age, semicolon, value, and then major, semicolon, value, right? Every string in JSON has like the double quotes versus the single quotes, okay? Now that's pretty easy, and you get actually a well-formed JSON object when you start with a dictionary, right? You define the keys, define the values that go into each of the keys, and then you just call json.dump-s to convert that. And then, although this isn't officially a video on file I/O, it's trivial to then save the JSON to a file, right? So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And let's say that we wanted to save the JSON, the student dictionary, in JSON format to a file, right? So we would say with open, this is one of your built-in functions, right? Student JSON, students.json, okay? And I'm just going to say write, okay, W plus, all right, as F, and then F dot write, and then just copy this, right? This is JSON dump-s students. C. All right. Now, when we get done running this program, we're going to have a text file called, or a JSON file called students.json. So before I run it, let's take a look at the console. CLS, dir, look ma, no JSON file. All right. And then let me make sure I save that. Visual Studio Code. Okay, that file saved. We got our with open students.json w plus. All right, let's run this program. Let's go back to the terminal. Clear the screen. Python. Okay. So there was no indication, right, that it got written, but we do a dir and we see students.json. We can go cat students.json. And there we have our JSON file. Okay. Now, just a couple other operations that I think are important on dictionaries. You can iterate over a dictionary either by the keys or the items, All right. So an item in a dictionary is the key value pair. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. So for example, in this particular dictionary, we've got this set of keys, right? We've got Rick, that's your outermost key, right? The biggest key. This is a key, first name, last name, right? Age. And then you have, this is also considered a value, right? Like this key has a value of a dictionary. And then within that dictionary, you're setting keys and values, right? So let's say if I wanted to iterate over, I would say for key for item in, let me see, I think it's for item in students items, all right, and then print F item. Okay. Now item. Okay. We have to do something here. I think for key value. Key all right, value all right. I'm getting this red here, so hang on one second. This is a function call. Okay, so let's run this and see if this runs. So item, it looks like it's gonna, I think this returns a tuple. Let me run it. If it blows up, then I know I'm wrong. All right, so let's go to the console. CLS. Yay, okay. All right, you can see from the output here, we've got key, Rick. That's the first big key, right? Value is this entire dictionary. So if you're going to do another dictionary, right, you would iterate over the primary keys, not the same as primary key in a database, right? But you got these big high-level keys like Rick in this case, right? Which I'm going to say is a bad choice for a key, right? But anyway, it's just a demo. So we're going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and we'll say for key value in students, right? We'll say, and then for key, and because each of those is a dictionary, right? We could say I'm going to say print key, okay, and then print key, and then for key value in value, okay, print key, I'm just going to say F key, well, I didn't use it up here, but I'll do key value, like that, right? So for key, okay, now let's run this. CLS. Okay. Oh wait, hang on one second. Let's go back to key value and value. Okay, so fixing things in real time. Key value in value dot items. Okay, and let's go back here. The assumption is that it's a dictionary, which it is in this case. Okay, there we go. So students, right, that's the JSON. And then here's the first key. And then here's the inner dictionary for that key, right? First name Rick, last name Miller, age 54, major computer science. I could make that a little bit prettier. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And let's go key. Like that. Key value. And I'm going to do a /t. /t for tab. So I want to tab over. All right, let's run that one. CLS. There we go. Okay. You know, still kind of an ugly baby, but at least you can see the stuff, right? So Rick, that's the key, that's the big key. And then there's the information for that dictionary. That's the value for Rick, right? All right, so dictionaries, you can iterate over the keys, you could iterate over the values. The chapter has a lot of great information. I recommend you read the chapter. And it gives at the very beginning, it gives a great overview as to what a dictionary is, right? So essentially, a dictionary is a Python data type that lets you store and access data by using key value pairs. A key is used to index its associated data or value. Keys must be immutable, and that's because strings are immutable, so you can use a string. Any immutable object, right? It really, a lot of times it's strings, but you just can't change the value of the key in the dictionary, because then, you know, if the reason why the key has to be immutable is because there's a function that's performed on the key, and it's a hash, right? So here we have a my dictionary in this diagram here, right? And we see my underscore dictionary quote A equals value 1. So what this means is there's a key called A, and it's pointing to a string. A is an immutable character, and it's hash mapped to keys table. Okay, and then this key entry, it has this hash value that does not change, right? Like every time A goes in there, A is hashed to that value. And so that's how Python knows where to find stuff in the dictionary, right? Or in the, you know, internally into that data structure. Okay. And this chapter explains why that must be immutable. But generally speaking, once you understand it, or once you've learned that concept, you don't have to think about it much anymore, right? It's not rocket science. When you create dictionaries, you're going to use things that are probably pretty decent, good keys, right? Yeah, there's all kinds of usages for keys, and the chapter kind of goes into that stuff. There's also 2 operations supported by dictionaries. All right, so read chapter 15. This short video has been simply just to give you an introduction to dictionaries. All right, and I will see you in the next video.